A cop was patrolling the icy outskirts of Cold Creek when he heard a sound beneath the old bridge. Just one bark. Then two. Faint. Measured. Like a signal only the forgotten would still send. When he followed it, what he found wasn't just a dog tied and shivering in the snow. It was a secret buried in silence. And a bond that would defy everything. What happened next will make you cry and believe in loyalty all over again. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. Let's see how far this story of courage and second chances can go. And if you believe that no working dog should ever be abandoned, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear might just change how you see justice and love. Cold Creek, Montana, was the kind of town that felt like it had been carved out of time and preserved in snow. Nestled at the foot of the Bitterroot Mountains, it was a place where winter didn't knock, it simply walked in and made itself at home. That January morning, the sky hung low and gray, snow drifted thick across the pine-lined roads, and the air smelled like frozen bark and old secrets. Temperatures had dropped to 9 degrees and the wind carried a sharp edge that made even the crows retreat to silence. Officer Ryan Maddox eased his cruiser off Route 74 and onto a narrow Forestry Service road, its edges half buried under last night's snow. 34 years old, Ryan was tall and broad-shouldered, with deep-set blue eyes and short black hair always slightly wind-tossed no matter how calm the weather. He had a square jaw, a subtle scar on his right cheek from a bar fight gone sideways during his first year on the force in Houston, and a calm intensity about him. Ryan had transferred to Cold Creek 6 weeks ago after what his file referred to as a disciplinary reassignment, though no one in town seemed to know the details. He didn't talk about it. The truth was, Ryan carried guilt like some men carried a sidearm constant, reliable, and loaded. The voice on the radio had been thin and static-laced. Possible animal distress under the Iron Cap Bridge. Locals reporting barking all night. Iron Cap Bridge was an old, rust-eaten structure just east of Cold Creek. It used to carry logging trucks across Miller's Ravine, but that was 20 years ago. These days, it stood mostly forgotten. Bones of iron stretched over a frozen creek bed like the ribs of some long-dead beast. Ryan parked where the plow line ended and grabbed his flashlight. Snow was already up to his shins as he trudged down the slope toward the ravine. With each step, his boots crunched against the icy ground. The wind groaned low across the bridge's girders, a metallic moan that sounded almost human. Then he heard it, a bark, short, muffled, and again. He stopped. The sound had come from beneath the bridge. Sliding carefully down the embankment, Ryan aimed his flashlight beneath the rusted steel supports. Shadows loomed in crisscrossed angles, but there, just under the far corner of the bridge, something moved. He stepped closer, the beam of his light sharpening. What he saw made his breath hitch. It was a dog, a German shepherd, tied to one of the beams with what looked like climbing rope, half buried in snow. Its fur was soaked and crusted with ice, muzzle trembling, eyes glazed but alert. A black canine vest clung to its body, the letters faded and scratched, but barely legible. Police Unit 12. Ryan dropped to one knee. "Hey, buddy. Easy now," he whispered. The dog flinched but didn't growl. Instead, it made a low, guttural whine, hoarse from cold and exhaustion. Ryan could see where the rope had dug into its front leg, raw and bleeding slightly, the snow around it tinged pink. He pulled out his pocket knife, hands steady despite the cold. "I'm getting you out of here." The moment the final knot was sliced, the dog collapsed into Ryan's arms, weak but still breathing. Ryan wrapped his coat around the dog's shivering form. "You're gonna be all right, soldier. I got you," he radioed in. "Dispatch, this is Maddox. I've got a live canine down here, injured and likely hypothermic. I'm bringing it in now. Request immediate vet assistance at Cold Creek Station." As he turned to climb back up the embankment, something caught his eye in the snow. A faint, track-heavy tire marks leading away from the service path and disappearing into the woods. Not fresh, but recent enough to stand out in the morning powder. Judging by the width and tread, it wasn't a regular vehicle. These were industrial grade, box truck, maybe larger, and they shouldn't have been there. He narrowed his eyes. This wasn't just someone abandoning a dog. Something else was at play. Back in the cruiser, the heater blasted as Ryan drove with one hand, the other resting gently on the dog's side. The shepherd let out a faint breath, its eyes half closed, one ear twitching at each bump in the road. Its body was covered in scars, some old, some fresh. Someone had hurt this animal. Someone who had access to canine gear and enough cruelty to leave it to die alone in the snow. He glanced at the mirror, the bridge, the tire tracks, the faded vest. Ryan didn't know what kind of mess he had just stepped into, but one thing was certain. This dog wasn't abandoned by accident. It was a message. And he was going to find out from who. The storm had passed by the time Ryan arrived at the Cold Creek Veterinary Clinic, but the air still clung to the chill of night. The streets were slick with melting snow, glistening like wet glass under the morning sun. The clinic sat at the edge of town, a single-story red brick building tucked between a shuttered bakery and an old service garage. A wooden sign out front read, Dr. Naomi Caldwell, DVM, in fading green paint. It was just after 7 a.m., but the open light flickered weakly behind the frosted glass door. Inside, the warmth smelled of antiseptic, cedar shavings, and faint traces of fur. A small bell rang as Ryan stepped in, cradling the injured shepherd wrapped in a wool blanket. A sleepy golden retriever lying behind the counter lifted its head at the sound, gave a tail thump, then went back to dozing. A voice called from the back room. "Just a second!" Moments later, a woman in her late 30s emerged, tying her dark brown curls back into a loose ponytail. She was tall and lean, with olive-toned skin and sharp cheekbones softened by warm hazel eyes. Her expression was alert, the kind that could switch from gentle to commanding in a blink. Naomi Caldwell moved like someone who had done this 1,000 times. Calm hands, quiet steps. She froze when she saw the dog. What happened? "Found him tied under Ironcap Bridge," Ryan replied, laying the dog gently on the stainless steel exam table. Was wearing a canine vest, letters nearly rubbed off but still readable. Naomi's face darkened. She moved quickly, checking the shepherd's pulse, eyes, gums. He's hypothermic, dehydrated. There's rope burn on his legs, scabbing on the side. He's been through hell. He let me cut him free without a fight, quiet the whole time. Ryan paused. "Any chance you can scan his chip?" Naomi gave a quick nod and reached for a portable scanner. She pressed it to the dog's neck. A faint beep echoed in the room, then silence. "No reading?" "Hang on." She adjusted the device and scanned again, then frowned. "There's a chip, but it's scrambled. Burnt out, maybe. Looks like someone manually disabled it." Ryan narrowed his eyes. Someone didn't want this dog being found. Naomi turned to her nearby workstation and typed something into the terminal. The screen flickered, then a name appeared. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God!" "What?" Naomi looked back at Ryan, voice hushed. "This is Titan." Ryan blinked. Titan? He was part of a federal narcotics K-9 unit based out of Denver. Unit 12, top-tier tracker, went missing last winter during a raid along the northern border. They never found the body, just blood on the snow and a destroyed comm vest. Ryan looked at the shepherd lying unconscious on the table. "So how the hell did he end up here, tied under a bridge in Cold Creek?" Naomi exhaled slowly. "That's the question, isn't it?" Ryan stepped closer to examine the damaged K-9 vest. One strap was shredded and frozen stiff, but when he pulled it back gently, he noticed a slight bulge stitched into the inner lining. Carefully, he unthreaded the seam with his pocket knife. Inside was a small black casing, half the size of a matchbox, a tracking unit old model, barely newer than analog. The LED on its surface was long dead. "Hidden tracker," Ryan muttered, "but not in the standard chip. Someone planted this for backup, then disabled it later." Naomi leaned closer. "I haven't seen this model in years. It predates most of the current fleet." Ryan turned the unit over in his palm. Somebody wanted Titan gone but made sure his disappearance wasn't traceable. Naomi's voice dropped to a whisper. You think someone inside the unit did this? Ryan didn't answer. His mind was already chasing scenarios. Internal sabotage. Off-the-books ops. Misdirection. He had seen it before. Cases that started in black and white but ended in a fog of gray. The only thing he knew for sure now was that Titan hadn't run off. He'd been taken. And whoever had him had plans. Can you keep him here? Ryan asked, quietly. I don't want anyone sniffing around until I figure out what's going on. Naomi gave a curt nod. He'll stay in the back recovery room. No one will know unless you tell them. There was a pause. Ryan met her eyes. Thank you. She softened. I worked with military dogs before opening this clinic, back in El Paso. I've seen what they go through. Titan's lucky you found him when you did. Ryan nodded, but he didn't feel lucky. He felt like he'd just stumbled into something much bigger than a lost dog. As he turned to leave, Naomi added, one more thing. His name, Titan, was given to him after a mission in Arizona. He tracked 4 smugglers through 40 miles of canyon, saved his handler's life when a booby trap triggered. That dog doesn't quit. Ryan paused at the door. Neither do I. Outside, the sky had shifted from gray to pale blue. Cold Creek's streets were beginning to stir plows scraping pavement, coffee shops flicking on signs, kids bundled in parkas waiting at the corner bus stop. But beneath the surface, something else was moving. Something that had tried to bury Titan like a secret beneath the snow, and Ryan Maddox wasn't going to let it stay hidden. Snowmelt slid down the gutters of Cold Creek like veins of silver, tracing the town's silent thaw. The storm had passed, but the cold lingered stubbornly in the bones of the buildings and the people. Inside Ryan's modest office at the Cold Creek Sheriff Substation, a small prefab structure wedged between the firehouse and a defunct laundromat Titan, lay curled on a wool blanket in the corner. A faint hum from the radiator filled the air, and outside the sun made a pale attempt to pierce the gray sky. Ryan sat hunched at his desk. A laminated topographic map of Cold Creek and its surrounding forestland spread in front of him. Red and blue pins marked old service roads, abandoned ranger cabins, and hunting trails that spiderwebbed across the hills. He traced a finger along a narrow ridgeline that led east of town, past a series of ravines, and toward a place labeled in faded ink. Darby Quarry. As if sensing the focus of his attention, Titan lifted his head. He stared at the map, ears pricking forward. The moment Ryan's finger paused over the quarry's coordinates, Titan let out a sudden bark. Not frantic, but purposeful. Then again, a low, rolling sound that carried weight. Ryan blinked. You know something about this place? Titan stood up slowly, his back leg still favoring a limp, and padded closer. His amber eyes fixed on the map like he could read it. When Ryan moved his hand to the opposite side of the map, the dog stayed silent. But the moment his finger returned to the quarry's outline, another bark, louder this time. That wasn't coincidence. Ryan leaned back in his chair, watching Titan with a mixture of awe and unease. All right, he murmured. Show me what you've got. He spent the next hour pulling archived field reports, land use documents, and satellite images from the department's database. Darby Quarry had officially shut down 8 years ago after a fatal landslide killed 3 workers. Since then, it had been listed as restricted access due to structural instability. But one curious thing stood out. 2 years ago, someone filed a request to inspect the site for environmental hazard reassessment. The application had been approved, but no follow-up reports were on file. The listed inspector, a man named Charles Dempsey. Ryan's brows furrowed. Dempsey hadn't worked in the regional environmental office in over 5 years. He died in a boating accident, confirmed by autopsy. A false identity, then. Someone had used a dead man's name to get access to the quarry. Digging further into the department's secure system, Ryan tried searching for Titan's name again. His registered K9 ID returned a restricted as redacted notice. But something new had appeared since his last check-in embedded trace of a deleted file path. It took him 20 minutes and a buried admin tool to pull the remnants. The file was corrupt, but a name survived in the header: Operation Black Hollow. He stared at the screen. He hadn't heard that name since Houston. Years ago, rumors circulated of a joint agency sting that had gone sideways along the northern trafficking corridors. Multiple assets compromised. Several undercover agents unaccounted for. The operation had never been confirmed. No names were ever published. But Ryan remembered the whispered acronym, BH-12. And now he had a dog titan formerly assigned to Unit 12, connected to a redacted operation. Connected to a location someone tried to erase from the map. Just then, the door creaked open and a tall woman in a snow-dusted parka stepped in. She had wavy blonde hair tied under a knit beanie, a wind-chapped face, and blue eyes that darted from Titan to Ryan with practiced calculation. She carried a bag slung over one shoulder and a name stitched in dark green on her vest. Karen Ridge, Forest Warden, Cold Creek Division. "Sheriff's out," Ryan said, not looking up. "You need something?" Karen tilted her head. Her voice was even and a little dry. "Actually, I was told you might need something. Naomi sent me." Ryan looked up. Karen set the bag down gently on his desk. "Trail maps, hand-drawn, pre-flooding. Some of the digital ones are missing routes." "Why would Naomi send you?" Ryan asked. "Because I'm the only one who's been up past mile marker 19 in the last 3 years," she said, brushing snow off her jacket. "And because she's worried about that dog." Ryan studied her for a moment. Karen was likely in her early 40s, with the wiry strength of someone who spent more time outdoors than in. Her hands were calloused. There was a calm to her presence, but it felt like something that had been earned the hard way. Naomi hadn't mentioned Karen before, but Ryan had a feeling she didn't mention a lot of things unless it mattered. He opened the trail maps and found one detailing a footpath that ran close to the Darby Quarry's northern edge. Karen leaned in, pointing with a gloved finger. "Here," she said. "That's the fire trail. It's eroded, but still passable if you've got good boots and a stubborn dog." Ryan's eyes flicked to Titan, who was now standing at attention, tail slightly raised. "I've got both," he muttered. Before Karen left, she paused at the door. "Watch your back out there. Some places don't want to be found, and sometimes neither do the people in them." Ryan nodded. "Thanks for the warning." As the door shut behind her, Ryan returned to the map, tracing the fire trail toward the quarry. He folded the page carefully, tucked it into his jacket, and stood. Titan was already waiting at the door. The morning after the map revealed its secrets, Ryan Maddox found himself driving along a back road lined with melting snow and the skeletal remains of last autumn's leaves. Titan sat in the passenger seat, head low but eyes alert, scanning the blur of trees that passed the window. The Cold Creek Sheriff's Substation had no official clearance to dig into federal canine records, especially not those connected to redacted operations. But Ryan had long since learned that unofficial paths often revealed the truth faster than paperwork. He was heading toward a rundown trailer lot just west of town's edge. The area, known to locals as Burnt Hollow, was once a logging camp but now served as home to off-grid loners, aging veterans, and people who preferred to be forgotten. At the edge of the gravel lane sat a dented airstream wrapped in tarps and anchored by cinder blocks. Smoke curled faintly from a chimney pipe at the roof's corner. Ryan parked and stepped out. Titan followed, limping slightly but determined. As they approached, a shotgun cocked from inside the trailer followed by a dry, gravelly voice. "You've got exactly one reason not to lose that kneecap, officer." Ryan didn't flinch. "Easy, Walter. It's me." There was a pause, then the sound of a bolt easing down. The trailer door creaked open. Walter Griggs appeared, squinting through a haze of cigarette smoke. He was in his late 60s, gaunt and wiry, with a buzz-cut head of gray hair and deep lines etched into his wind-chapped skin. A faded marine tattoo stretched along his forearm. He wore mismatched flannel and a grease-stained vest, and his left eye was clouded damaged years ago by a training explosion during a DEA field op. Walter had been one of the last IT specialists embedded with federal canine units before he retired without ceremony, under circumstances no one talked about. "Didn't expect you to come calling," Walter muttered, stepping aside. "Dog looks like hell. He was tied under Iron Cap Bridge 3 days ago," Ryan said, brushing snow off his boots as he stepped inside. "Name's Titan." Walter's face changed, a twitch, just enough for Ryan to catch it. "So, it's true," Walter said softly. "They lost him after Black Hollow." "You know about that op?" "I built the data suite they used. Afterward, I tried pulling the logs to investigate the signal failure. Next thing I knew, my credentials were revoked and my house got raided by Internal Affairs. Only thing they left me was this tin can and a burner laptop." Ryan crossed his arms. "I need anything you manage to pull before they shut you down." Walter stared at him for a beat, then gave a low grunt and motioned toward a metal desk at the corner. He flipped open a dusty hard case and removed a cracked black SSD drive. "What I give you stays off network. You plug this into anything official, you're going to have suits knocking down your door before you can spell warrant." Ryan took the drive and slid it into his pocket. "Understood." Walter lit another cigarette and glanced down at Titan. The dog was sniffing the corner of the desk with recognition. Walter knelt, resting a weathered hand on the dog's shoulder. "I trained this one," he said. "Only dog I've ever seen that could map a scent trail like it was topography. We used to call him the Compass." Titan leaned gently into his touch. "Whatever he saw out there, it was enough to scare someone into deleting half an operation." Ryan nodded. "Then we're going to find out what it was." Back at the station, Ryan didn't risk the department's system. Instead, he used a secure laptop he kept off-grid in a lockbox, the same one he used back in Houston during an internal whistleblower inquiry that nearly cost him his badge. He booted it up in his apartment above the old train station, Titan curled at his feet. The folder on the SSD was labeled BH12 Pshaj Archive. Inside were fragmented video files, grainy clips taken from a body-mounted K9 camera. Some showed Titan weaving through pine forest at dusk. Others tracked his nose as he followed a chemical scent trail through abandoned cabins, creeks, and scattered evidence markers. Accompanying audio captured handler commands, radio chatter, and the ever-present breathing of a dog in full focus. Ryan scrolled through files until one caught his eye, time-stamped just 5 days before Titan's disappearance. The footage began in a snowy ridge, the terrain oddly familiar. Titan was leading through scrub pines, his posture tense. The camera tilted as he pulled ahead, crossing over rocks and brush. Ahead, barely visible in the static haze, stood a rusted metal frame, a support pillar. Iron Cap Bridge. Ryan leaned in. Titan in the video barked once, sniffed the base of the pillar, then began pawing at a muddy spot beneath. The camera zoomed awkwardly, catching a glint of something metallic in the soil, and then black. The footage cut out mid-frame. No fade, no glitch, just a hard stop. Ryan rewound and played it again. Same thing. Someone had intentionally spliced the footage. He sat back in his chair. Titan hadn't just wandered off after a mission. He'd returned to Cold Creek, likely following a scent trail. He'd found something near the bridge, something important enough that someone had deleted the record of it. And then he vanished. But now Titan was back, alive, and the trail wasn't cold yet. The light snowfall had resumed by mid-afternoon, blanketing Cold Creek in a soft gray hush that muffled tire crunches and distant coyote howls. Ryan Maddox sat alone in his parked cruiser outside a regional DMV annex office, heat running low, laptop open across his knees. The faint signal bouncing off a nearby logging tower was just enough to let him ping a background trace on the name he'd pulled from a buried personnel file linked to Operation Black Hollow Clay Jensen. It hadn't been easy. The data had been mostly stripped no unit photo, no direct rank, but one document fragment remained, corrupted and partially redacted. It listed Jensen as a field lead attached to K9 Unit 12, with a note reading, "Service terminated, dishonorable." Ryan leaned back, chewing the inside of his cheek. In most agencies, dishonorable discharge meant a quiet disappearance. People didn't ask. People didn't want to know. But this time, it meant something deeper. Someone had made sure Jensen's records vanished for good. Only they hadn't been thorough enough. He dug deeper, rerouting queries through a bypass tool Walter had given him. A grainy employee badge surfaced. Clay Jensen now worked as a contracted security supervisor for Whitetail Freight Logistics, a mid-sized transport company based near the Montana-Canada border. It handled high-value and special circumstance cargo, mostly across unmarked service roads. The man in the photo looked rougher than the official mugshot from years ago. Thinner face, overgrown beard, and eyes too distant for the frame. The kind of man who once believed in protocol, but now believed in nothing. Ryan saved the image. At that moment, his phone buzzed. Blocked number. He hesitated, then answered. Maddox. No voice, just static. Then a click. The line dropped. Ryan stared at the screen. Seconds later, a notification lit up. A new email. No sender address. The subject line, "Some things are better buried." He opened it. No body text, just a single PDF attachment. He tapped it open. Inside was an image of Titan taken under Iron Cap Bridge before Ryan arrived, his body curled beneath the beam, rope taut around his leg. The photo was time-stamped. 03:41 a.m., 1 hour before Ryan's rescue. Beneath it, in bold font, "Stop digging or you'll be next." Ryan stared, heart slowing to a dangerous calm. Someone had been watching. He closed the laptop and started the engine. The email had confirmed something critical. Someone out there still had access. Someone who knew Jensen, who had eyes on Titan, who hadn't expected Ryan to find him. That evening, Ryan returned to Naomi Caldwell's clinic under the pretense of checking on Titan. In truth, he needed quiet space to think, to regroup, away from the station's routine. Naomi was in the back, cleaning surgical tools. Her hair was tied in a tighter bun than usual, her movements sharp and efficient, betraying the tension underneath. She didn't say much, but her eyes flicked to Titan and softened. "He's healing faster than expected," she said. "Eating well. Sleeps near the door like he's still on patrol." Ryan nodded. "That's because he is." She looked up, curious. "I think I found one of his old handlers. Clay Jensen. Dishonorably discharged. He's working private now freight security near the border." Naomi straightened slightly. "You think he's involved?" Ryan hesitated. "I think he knows something." Titan reacted to his name ears pinned, body rigid. And now someone's sending me photos they shouldn't have. Naomi's jaw tightened. "You're being watched." He nodded. "Which means I'm close." 2 days later, Ryan made the drive north, blending in among delivery trucks and salt-caked SUVs heading for the old mining region. Whitetail Freight operated from a sprawling compound sign behind chain-link fencing and motion lights, its yard cluttered with box trucks, long hauls, and empty fuel rigs. Ryan parked at a diner across the street, Hilltop Junction Cafe, where the waitresses had perms and coffee came black and endless. He watched from behind a chipped ceramic mug. At 5:42 p.m., a man exited the Whitetail Gate wearing a Navy security jacket with a patch torn off one shoulder. Even from a distance, Ryan recognized the sunken face and stooped shoulders. Clay Jensen. He walked with a slight limp and carried himself like a man used to shadows. Ryan didn't follow immediately. He waited. 10 minutes later, a white cargo truck rumbled out of the freight yard. Jensen was in the passenger seat. No license plates, just a serial code and dusted paint. Ryan started his engine and followed at a safe distance, headlights off until they were out of town. The truck took the south access road, not toward the border, but cutting diagonally back toward Cold Creek. Ryan's pulse ticked up. There were only a handful of roads that direction, and one led directly to a place no one had used in years. Darby Quarry. He kept following. 15 minutes later, the truck turned off the main road and rolled over a barely there path leading into the trees. Ryan slowed, let distance grow, then cut his lights. He didn't go any farther. Not yet. But now he had what he needed. The air around Darby Quarry was colder than the rest of Cold Creek that morning. It clung to the rocks and crept beneath Ryan Maddox's collar like fingers made of ice. Dawn hadn't yet broken fully. The sky still sat in that slate-gray silence between night and the day's first breath. Ryan moved carefully through the overgrown trail flanking the old quarry's northern perimeter. Behind him, Titan stepped with ghost-like precision, his black and tan coat low to the earth, tail taut with focus. They had left the cruiser parked half a mile away and entered the quarry on foot, using a deer path known only to locals and maybe a few smugglers. Ryan wore a black utility jacket, Kevlar underneath, and a soft wool cap tucked low over his ears. His sidearm was loaded, but it wasn't his gun hand that twitched. It was his left, where his fingers ached with anticipation. Darby Quarry had once boomed with life and machines, until a landslide 12 years ago forced the company to shutter operations. The state claimed it was unstable, liable to collapse. But as Ryan reached the first of the old storage sheds, he saw no signs of instability. Only silence. Artificial silence. Titan paused ahead and let out a low woof, barely audible. Ryan froze. A moment passed. Then the shepherd took a slow step forward, his nose tracing the air. Ryan crouched, brushing back a curtain of ferns. What lay beyond made his breath catch. Set into the quarry's granite wall, partially hidden by camouflage netting and crates, was a gaping mouth of a tunnel. It wasn't listed on any of the public maps Ryan had checked. But the metal frame bolted into the rock looked recent, reinforced. Someone had repurposed this place. The tunnel's floor was smooth and dusty, with fresh tire prints pressed into the thin layer of grime narrow, like those from utility carts. As they slipped inside, the air shifted, damp, cold, still. The passage ran deeper than Ryan expected. Pipes lined the ceiling, and makeshift lighting cables snaked across the rock walls. Titan stayed close now, ears rotating every few seconds. Then, halfway through a sharp left turn, he stopped dead. He looked up at Ryan. Barked, once sharp, urgent, then dropped to the floor and began to dig. Ryan knelt. The ground here was layered with crushed gravel, but Titan pawed through it with precision. A few seconds later he stopped, nudged something half-buried with his nose. Ryan brushed away the loose earth. It was a small, dented badge. K9 issued. Steel core. The letters were mostly scratched out, but the outline of Unit 12 remained barely visible beneath the tarnish. A diagonal strike across its center told the rest of the story. It had been intentionally destroyed. Ryan held it in his gloved hand, the weight heavier than the metal should allow. "This is where they kept you," he whispered. Titan didn't respond, but his stare said everything. Just then, a sound echoed down the tunnel, a faint, dragging metal against stone. Ryan rose instantly, tucking the badge into his coat. The noise faded. Probably a cart, or someone who thought the quarry was still theirs. Ryan and Titan backtracked quickly, exiting through the northern bend and circling up toward the ridge. From above, Ryan paused, scanning the quarry yard with binoculars. 2 trucks were parked in shadow, both unmarked but identical in a make. One had its doors open. Several plastic crates were stacked beside it. Ryan counted at least 7, and each bore the same marking. Bio Live Transport, C6, C12. His breath hitched. That code again. Later that day, back at Naomi Caldwell's clinic, the pieces began to slide into place. She was reviewing Titan's scans on her old desktop when something caught her eye. Zooming in on a high-resolution X-ray of his left scapula, Naomi frowned. There, just near the bone, was a slight indentation. She pulled the physical records and flipped through the intake notes. Under Old Scar, left shoulder, someone had scribbled in faded blue ink, "Tattooed pre-retirement. Barely visible under fur. Reads C6, C12. She stared at it. C6, C12. It wasn't a veterinary note. It was an internal code assigned not to an injury, but to an operation. She knew that much from her years working near Fort Bliss. Dogs with classified missions sometimes had identifiers hidden on them. Tattoos, scars, even chips fused near non-vital bones. She called Ryan. "This wasn't just a nickname," she told him. "C6E12 is a route system, like tunnel designations." Ryan sat silent on the other end, Titan at his feet, watching his face. "I saw crates today marked with the same code," he said. "They were prepping for something, moving something or someone." Naomi paused. "Then you need to move first." Snow fell heavy that night, blanketing Cold Creek in a quiet unease as if the sky itself were bracing for what was coming. By 9:17 p.m., the quarry was encircled. The trees whispered with wind, and the air carried the bitter weight of secrecy finally about to break. Ryan Maddox stood near the command van parked a half-mile out, clad in tactical black and flanked by 4 members of the state's Rapid Response Unit. Their vests bore the insignia of the Montana Special Investigations Task Force, called in under urgent pretense of a weapons trafficking raid, but Ryan knew what they were really walking into. The lead operative, Captain Eliza Hart, was a stocky woman in her mid-40s with deep lines around her mouth and piercing brown eyes that saw through most excuses. Her hair was cropped short under her helmet, and her voice had the sharpness of someone who had given too many last warnings in her career. She had reviewed Ryan's intel quietly, only asking 3 questions before muttering, "We move at 21:30, no lights, no second chances." Titan sat beside Ryan, fully alert now, a subtle tremble beneath his shoulder. For not fear, but energy waiting to ignite. He wore a new canine vest Naomi had stitched herself, black with no insignia, just a single stitched thread at the collar. Return with honor. The plan was simple. 2 teams would enter through the main service corridor, while Ryan and Titan flanked the northern ridge Titan had previously led him through. Eliza would breach the tunnel hub and secure the front. Ryan's job was to find whatever wasn't on the official maps. At 21:30, they moved. The descent into the quarry was wordless. Snow muffled boots and the sky above had dimmed completely, a dense storm rolling in from the west. Titan took point as they reached the hidden deer path. Within minutes, they were back at the camouflaged entrance, no guards tonight, just the electric hiss of distant floodlights humming deeper inside. They entered the tunnel. Again, Titan paused only once at the turn where he'd uncovered the shattered badge. Then he pushed forward, moving faster now, his nose to the ground. Midway through the passage, Titan suddenly broke right, veering toward a narrow gap between 2 stacked cargo crates. Ryan followed, ducking beneath a low beam, and found himself inside a shadowed culvert. The smell changed here: metal, urine, something burned. Then the whimpering began. 3 kennels, crude, welded from mismatched fencing and chain link, tucked behind an old generator unit. Inside, 3 German shepherds, malnourished, muzzled, their eyes glassy with exhaustion, but they stood when they saw Titan. Ryan dropped to one knee, checking the locks. "Easy. We've got you." Titan pressed his nose to the cage bars, whining low. One of the dogs responded, a raspy bark, weak but insistent. Ryan cut through the lock with bolt cutters and unlatched each cage carefully. The dogs emerged one by one, limping, tails half-tucked but responsive. Then a crackle of gunfire from the main tunnel. Ryan looked toward the sound, then back at the dogs. "Go with him," he whispered, motioning to Titan. "Take them out the way we came." Titan seemed to understand. He nudged each dog until they began limping toward the exit, glancing back every few steps to make sure Ryan followed. But Ryan didn't follow. Not yet. He moved deeper into the tunnel, toward the sound of retreating boots. That's when he saw Clay Jensen. The man was running, hunched low, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, flashlight beam dancing wildly across the floor. His frame was thinner now, face gaunt and wild beneath a tangled beard. He reached a side door and began to pull it shut, but Ryan called out, "Jensen!" The man turned just in time to see a dark blur leap from the shadows. Titan hit him like a missile, tackling him into the wall. The duffel bag fell, sliding open. Inside, bundled cables, an external hard drive. Ryan knelt and zipped the bag open. The drive was marked in red ink. Confidential, internal, K9 BH12 AUTF. Jensen groaned beneath Titan's weight. Ryan flipped him over. "What's this?" Jensen spat blood. "Insurance." Ryan stood. "Against what?" Jensen laughed bitterly. "People like you. People who think dogs are the only ones worth saving." Ryan grabbed the drive. "This is a confession." Jensen smirked. "It's a tombstone." Ryan stepped back. Titan released him on command. By the time Eliza and her team stormed through the corridor, the gunfire had stopped. The facility was secured. The tunnel sealed. But the real treasure wasn't the stolen cargo or the twisted records, it was what Ryan handed her in a black evidence bag. Inside that drive was a directory of names. Officers flagged. Agents discredited. Dogs reassigned, then quietly erased. And among the names, one stood out. Officer Mark Hanley Titan's original handler. He had been reported killed during Operation Black Hollow, but the report had been filed by Clay Jensen. Spring arrived slowly in Cold Creek. The thaw didn't come with sudden floods or bursting blooms, but with soft drips from icicles, the creak of shifting soil, and the quiet return of color to the trees. Snow still lingered in the hollows of the pines, but the air carried something different now: warmth. Yes, but also closure. A month had passed since the raid at Darby Quarry. The tunnel was sealed. The names on the drive were turned over to federal authorities, and Clay Jensen now awaited trial under 23 federal charges: conspiracy, obstruction, and unlawful detainment among them. Media vans had rolled through town briefly, capturing images of the now quiet mine before vanishing again, as if the world couldn't linger too long on things it didn't want to understand. But the town remembered. So did Titan. That morning, the Cold Creek Police Department held a memorial ceremony on the edge of Veterans Field, just beneath the flagpole that once flew at half-staff after Officer Mark Hanley's supposed death. Now it flew proudly above a freshly planted tree, an American elm with roots just beginning to stretch. A small crowd gathered, officers in dress blues, local residents, children holding little flags. A white podium stood near the base of the tree, draped with a navy cloth and a silver plaque. Ryan stood beside Titan, both of them in their best. Ryan wore a crisp navy uniform, his badge freshly polished. Titan, now fully recovered, stood tall and calm in a new vest bearing the insignia of the K9 Valor Division, his name embroidered in gold thread across the side. The department's new chief, Rachel Donnelly, a petite woman with tight silver curls and a no-nonsense demeanor honed from 2 decades in homicide, stepped forward to the mic. She wore her medals plainly, and her voice, though not loud, carried weight. "Today, we honor a partner who never gave up on his mission," she said, "who endured captivity, injury, and betrayal and still chose to serve. Titan is not only a hero, he is a reminder of what loyalty means, of what justice costs, and of how healing begins." She stepped aside. The crowd applauded as Ryan knelt beside Titan, brushing his hand gently down the dog's back. Titan didn't move, just closed his eyes slightly, ears relaxed. Ryan spoke next briefly, but honestly. "I didn't know Titan's past when I found him under that bridge," he said. "But I know his future now. He's coming home with me." The applause that followed was louder. Not explosive, but steady, warm, human. 3 weeks later, the old warehouse on the outskirts of town, once used to store logging equipment, had been scrubbed clean and converted into something entirely new: the Cold Creek K9 Recovery and Training Center. Naomi Caldwell stood near the whiteboard in the main room, her dark curls pulled back, a pencil behind one ear, and a clipboard in her hand. She wore a soft brown utility jacket and jeans, her boots slightly muddy from the yard outside. Her presence was commanding, yet maternal, like someone who could both suture a wound and train a team. She looked around at the space they'd built together. Agility courses lined one side of the room ramps, cones, scent trails. On the other side, cushioned kennels with names already printed above them: Echo, Ranger, Duke. Rescued canines from other precincts, injured in action or emotionally withdrawn from missions gone wrong. Dogs that would have been discarded, forgotten, but not here. Ryan walked in with Titan at his side. He wore plain clothes now, flannel shirt, worn boots, but his posture remained the same. Alert, grounded, changed. Titan moved with new authority, not just a survivor anymore, a mentor. The younger dogs looked up when he passed, ears perking, bodies shifting in mimicry. Naomi smiled as she approached Ryan. "He's already got the pack listening." Ryan gave a small laugh. "I think he's just trying to make sure no one else ends up where he was." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as Titan demonstrated a scent trail drill for 2 trainees, his body poised, his gaze sharp, his every move deliberate. Naomi nudged Ryan gently. "You're good with him." Ryan looked at her. "He saved my life. I'm just trying to return the favor." She smiled. "I think you already have." Later that evening, back at Ryan's cabin just outside of town, the fireplace crackled low. Titan lay stretched out on the rug, his head resting on his front paws, eyes half closed. Ryan sat nearby, feet up on a worn ottoman, a book open in his lap he wasn't really reading. Outside, the last snow of the season melted in quiet rivulets down the hill. Ryan glanced at the photos now pinned to the mantel. One showed Titan standing with Officer Mark Hanley, both of them younger, lighter. Another, more recent, was of the 3 rescued canines, now healthy and enrolled in reconditioning training. A new chapter, not one marked by vengeance or ghosts, but by purpose. He reached down, scratched behind Titan's ears. The dog stirred slightly, tail thumping once against the rug. "You did good, partner," Ryan whispered, and for the first time in a long while, he believed the silence that followed was full of peace. Sometimes miracles don't come with lightning or thunder, they come on 4 legs, in silence, with eyes that remember everything and still choose to forgive. Titan wasn't just a dog. He was a survivor, a symbol of unwavering loyalty, and proof that even when we're left in the cold, grace finds us. In our own lives, we all go through moments where we feel abandoned, forgotten, or broken. But just like Titan, there's always a hand or a paw reaching out in the dark. Sometimes it's a second chance, a stranger's kindness, or the strength to stand again. And sometimes it's God reminding us He hasn't left our side. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope. Comment below with Amen if you believe every soul, human or animal, deserves a second chance. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay with us for more stories of faith, love, and redemption. May God bless you and protect the loyal hearts in your life.